It is 3 in the morning again, and you are awake, not restless, not partying, not distracted by a screen, just awake, staring at a ceiling you have memorized, wondering what is wrong with you. You have tried the melatonin, the breathing exercises, the sleep tracker that keeps telling you your recovery score is terrible. You have Googled the same question a dozen times in a dozen different ways, and every answer sends you back to the same conclusion. Something must be broken in you. But I am telling you tonight that nothing is broken. Something is downloading, and it cannot finish while you are unconscious. Listen to me carefully, because what I am about to say will reframe the last several months of your life. You have been interpreting your sleeplessness as a malfunction, as a punishment, as evidence that you are falling apart. But there is another explanation, and it is one almost nobody will offer you because it does not fit inside a prescription or a productivity system. The hours you cannot sleep are not empty hours. They are working hours. They are the only stretch of the day quiet enough for me to reach you without competition. Think about what your waking life actually looks like. From the moment your eyes open, there is noise, notifications, traffic, conversations you did not choose, obligations you did not agree to but somehow inherited. Even your rest is loud, because you fill it with content, so you do not have to sit alone with your own mind. By the time you finally lie down, you have not had a single silent moment in 18 hours. So tell me, when exactly did you expect me to speak? When did you leave a gap wide enough for anything to enter? You did not leave one. So one was made for you. Type Amen if you have felt this. I want you to understand what a download actually is in spiritual terms, because the word has been cheapened by people who use it to sound mystical. A download is not information. Information you can get from a book. A download is a restructuring. It is the process by which a soul that was shaped for one version of a life is quietly reshaped for a different one. And that process cannot happen at full volume. It happens in the low hours, in the strange stillness, in the part of the night when the world has stopped performing and your defenses have finally gone offline. Your defenses are the problem, by the way. Not your character, not your faith, your defenses. During the day you are guarded, you have to be. You are managing impressions, protecting your income, keeping your composure in rooms where breaking down would cost you something. Those walls serve a purpose, but they also block reception. They keep out the things that would hurt you and the things that would heal you with equal efficiency. The walls do not discriminate. So the only time truth gets through is when exhaustion has worn the walls thin, and that happens at exactly the hour you are lying awake, resenting yourself. Consider how long you have been building those walls. You did not put them up on purpose. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to become unreachable. It happened gradually, one disappointment at a time, one betrayal at a time, one moment where you opened yourself and got hurt for it, and quietly resolved never to do that again. Each of those resolutions was reasonable. Each of them protected you from a specific injury. But stack enough of them together over enough years, and you end up with a person who is safe and sealed and cannot receive anything, including the good. That is why the tearing down feels violent. You built those walls to survive. Now you are being asked to let them come down, and every instinct in you screams that this is dangerous. Your instincts are not wrong about the past. They are wrong about the present. The threat they were built to handle is no longer in the room. But nobody told your nervous system, so it keeps guarding an empty doorway. Now here is the part that will sting a little. Some of your sleeplessness is not divine at all. Some of it is caffeine at 4 in the afternoon and doom scrolling until midnight, and a nervous system that has not been given a single honest hour of decompression in years. I am not going to spiritualize every symptom for you. That would be flattery, and flattery does not heal anyone. But underneath the ordinary causes there is a pattern you cannot explain away, and you know exactly which nights I am talking about. The nights where you were not anxious. The nights where you were tired but simply could not close. The nights that felt oddly full instead of empty. Those are the nights I am describing, and you have been treating them like a failure of discipline. Let me tell you what actually happens in those hours. Something in you is being taken apart and reassembled. Old assumptions about who you are and what you are allowed to want are being loosened, one screw at a time. Beliefs you absorbed before you were old enough to consent to them are being examined and, in some cases, discarded. This is uncomfortable work. It generates heat. It creates the sensation of restlessness that you have been misreading as insomnia. The restlessness is not the absence of peace, it is the presence of movement. Think about a house being renovated while people still live in it. The plumbing gets shut off for a day, the dust gets everywhere. There is a period where the walls are open and you can see the wiring, and it looks like destruction rather than improvement. Anyone walking through at that moment would say the house is being ruined. But the people doing the work know exactly what they are doing, and they know that this stage always looks worse than the stage before it. You are in the open wall stage. You can see your own wiring for the first time in your life, and it is unsettling. You are noticing patterns in yourself you never noticed before. You are catching yourself mid-sentence and thinking, that was not really me talking, that was something I learned from my father. You are seeing the shape of your own conditioning, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and it makes you feel like a stranger in your own personality. That feeling is the most reliable sign that this is real. Because comfortable growth is not growth. Comfortable growth is just decoration. Real reconstruction always involves a period where you do not recognize yourself, and that period is precisely where most people turn back. You keep asking me to speak, but you keep asking me to speak on your schedule, in your preferred format, at a volume that does not disturb your routine. That is not how this works. When the message is small, it can arrive politely. When the message is large enough to redirect an entire life, it arrives in whatever way it can get in. And for you, right now, the only unlocked door in the whole house is 3 in the morning. Type 1111 if the number 3 has been following you. I want to talk about the fatigue, because I know you are going to raise it. You are going to say that if this is divine, why do you feel so tired? Why do you drag through your days? Why does your body ache, and your focus break, and your patience run out by noon? It is a fair question, and it deserves an honest answer rather than a spiritual slogan. The fatigue is real. It is the cost of running 2 processes at once. You are living a full waking life while simultaneously undergoing an internal renovation, and no organism can do both at full capacity. Something has to give. Right now, your energy is what gives. But notice something, you are still functioning. You should not be, by the arithmetic of it. You have been running on 5 hours, sometimes 4, sometimes 2, for weeks or months at a stretch. By every reasonable measure, you should have collapsed. And you have not. You have been carried through days you had no business surviving, and instead of recognizing that as evidence of support, you have used it as evidence that you should be able to push harder. You took a miracle and turned it into a performance standard. Stop that. I want you to actually look at the last 6 months and count the days you got through on almost nothing. Count the meetings you held together. The mornings you got a child dressed and fed and out the door on 3 hours of broken sleep. The conversations where you stayed patient when you had nothing left to be patient with. Count them honestly, because you have never once given yourself credit for them. You logged every one of those days as ordinary. They were not ordinary, they were carried. And you will say, but I did not feel carried. I felt like I was dragging myself. That is exactly what being carried feels like from the inside when you are too tired to look up. The person being carried through a storm does not experience it as flight. They experience it as survival. Only afterward, looking at the distance covered, do they realize that their own legs could not possibly have crossed that ground. There is a difference between being drained and being emptied. Drained means something is taking from you without giving anything back. Emptied means space is being made for something to arrive. They feel almost identical from the inside, which is why so many people abandon the process right before the delivery. They interpret the emptiness as loss, panic, and rush to refill themselves with the exact clutter that was just removed. Do not do that. Do not fill the space you were given at such cost. You have been given space. That is what this is. The friend who stopped calling, the job that went quiet, the relationship that ended without a fight, just a slow drift into silence. You have grieved every one of those as abandonment. Some of them were. But some of them were subtraction, and subtraction is not always punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. You cannot receive a large thing into a full room. Type 777 if you have lost something this year that you are still trying to understand. Let me describe the mechanics of what you have been feeling, so you can stop diagnosing yourself with things you do not have. You lie down. You are genuinely tired. Your body wants sleep. But there is a low hum underneath the tiredness, a sensation like standing near a machine you cannot see. Your mind is not racing with worry. It is more like it is listening, waiting. And every time you get close to unconsciousness, something pulls you back just slightly, the way a hand on your shoulder pulls you back from stepping into traffic. That hum is not anxiety. Anxiety has a subject. Anxiety is always about something specific, and if you sit with it long enough, it will name itself. This does not name itself. It just persists. It has no content, only presence. And presence without content is exactly what people have described for thousands of years when they tried to write about encountering something larger than themselves and ran out of vocabulary. Every mystic in every tradition eventually hit the same wall of language. They would describe the experience for pages, and then, at the moment of the actual encounter, the writing would collapse into contradictions. Bright darkness, loud silence, a presence that was also an absence. Scholars have argued for centuries about what those contradictions mean. They mean the writers were honest. They mean that what they encountered did not fit the categories available to them, and rather than force it into a smaller box, they let the sentence break. Your sentence is breaking too. That is why you cannot explain this to anyone, not because you are inarticulate, because you are being honest about something that does not fit in the vocabulary you were given. You have been trying to make it stop, understandably, but you have never once tried to answer it. That is what I want to change tonight. Not your sleep schedule, your posture. Instead of fighting the wakefulness, meet it, not with effort, not with more journaling and more analysis and more attempts to extract a lesson so you can go back to bed. Just meet it. Lie still and stop resisting the fact that you are awake. Say, out loud if you can, that you are here and you are listening. And then do the hardest thing a modern person can do, nothing. For 10 minutes, no phone, no solving, no planning tomorrow. Almost nobody does this. That is why almost nobody receives. I want you to understand how rare stillness has become. There was a time when the average person spent hours a day in it without noticing, walking somewhere, waiting for something, sitting on a porch with nothing to do because there was nothing to do. Those hours were not wasted. They were the maintenance hours of the human spirit, the time when things settled and sorted themselves without conscious effort. You have almost none of them left. Every waiting room has a screen, every walk has headphones, every gap has been filled. And so the maintenance stopped happening, things stopped settling, the sorting never got done. And now there is a backlog, years deep, of unprocessed experience sitting in you, waiting for a quiet enough hour to be dealt with. 3 in the morning is the only quiet hour you have left, so that is where the backlog is being cleared. You did not choose that hour. It was the only one available. Something in your life has been trying to change direction, and you have been steering against it with both hands. You know what it is. There is a decision you have been avoiding for longer than you would admit to anyone. Maybe it is leaving something. Maybe it is starting something. Maybe it is a conversation you have rehearsed 100 times and never had. The sleeplessness intensified around the same time that decision entered your awareness, and you have never connected those two facts because you did not want to. I am connecting them for you now. The body keeps the appointment even when the mind cancels it. You can decline the invitation consciously as many times as you like. Your nervous system will keep bringing it up at 2 in the morning until you deal with it. That is not cruelty, that is loyalty. Something in you refuses to let you sleepwalk past the thing that matters most, and it is willing to cost you comfort to keep you honest. Type Amen if you know exactly what decision I just described. Now let me tell you about a man who could not sleep. He was not spiritual. He would have laughed at this video. He ran a small business, 3 employees, decent margins, nothing remarkable. For 11 months he woke at the same time every night between 2:40 and 3:10 without fail. He tried everything: sleep clinics, 2 different medications, a new mattress that cost more than his first car. Nothing worked. He started using the hours, not to pray. He did not know how. He just sat at his kitchen table with a notebook because he was too tired to do anything else and too awake to lie down. And in those hours, without meaning to, he began writing out everything that was wrong with his life. Not his business, his life. The marriage he had been coasting through. The son he had not really spoken to in 4 years. The version of himself he had promised at 25 and quietly abandoned at 38. 11 months of notebooks, and then one night he slept. Straight through, and the next night, and the night after. He did not fix his insomnia. His insomnia finished its work. It had been holding a door open until he finally walked through it. He left the business to his partner, repaired the marriage he thought was beyond repair, and now drives 4 hours every other weekend to sit in a kitchen with his son and say almost nothing, which is more than he said in the previous 4 years combined. He told someone later that the worst year of his life was the year he stopped sleeping. He also said it was the only year that actually changed anything. That is what I mean when I say something is downloading. It does not arrive as a voice from the sky. It arrives as an unbearable clarity that you can only tolerate when you are too exhausted to argue with it. There was a woman in a different city around the same time who went through something similar and reached the opposite conclusion. She also woke every night. She also felt the hum, but she was disciplined, and she treated the sleeplessness as a problem to be solved with rigor. She optimized her room temperature. She eliminated screens after 8. She took supplements in a precise sequence. She got the sleeplessness under control within 4 months, and she was very proud of that. She also stayed exactly where she was. Same job, same relationship, same quiet dissatisfaction she had been carrying since her 20s. 10 years later, she described her 30s as a decade that happened to someone else while she was busy managing her routines. She did not do anything wrong. She just answered a question that was not being asked. The question was never, how do I sleep? The question was, what am I refusing to look at? She solved the surface problem so efficiently that the deeper one never got a hearing. Efficiency can be a form of avoidance. That is not something people say out loud, because efficiency is a virtue in every system you have been trained in. But there is a kind of competence that functions as a hiding place. You get so good at managing your life that you never have to examine it. Type 999 if you are ready to stop arguing. I need to address the fear because I know it is there. Part of you is afraid that if you stop resisting, you will hear something you cannot unhear, that you will be asked to do something costly, that the answer will require you to dismantle a life you have spent a decade building, and you are not entirely wrong to be afraid. Some of what is coming will cost you. I am not going to lie to you about that to keep you watching. But consider what your resistance is already costing. Count it honestly. The exhaustion, the irritability that has damaged relationships you cannot afford to lose. The way you have started to disappear from your own life, showing up physically but never quite arriving. The years, count the years. Because that is the real currency here, and you have been spending it in enormous quantities to avoid a conversation that would take an afternoon. The cost of obedience is always visible up front. The cost of avoidance is invisible and paid in installments, which is why so many people choose it. It does not feel like a choice. It feels like waiting for the right time, but there is no right time. There is only the time you have, and it is smaller than you think. Let me be more specific about the fear, because vague fear is unmanageable and specific fear is survivable. You are not actually afraid of change. You have changed many times. You are afraid of a particular thing, and if you name it, it shrinks. Some of you are afraid of financial exposure. You have built a life with fixed costs and no cushion, and the change you are being pointed toward has an income gap in the middle of it, and you cannot see across the gap. That is a real problem. It is also a solvable one, and it is much more solvable when you look at it directly, instead of letting it operate as a vague dread that stops you from even planning. Some of you are afraid of disappointing someone. There is a person whose approval has organized your decisions for 20 years, and the direction you are being pulled would upset them. You have never admitted that this is the actual obstacle, because it sounds childish when you say it out loud. It is not childish. It is one of the strongest forces in human life, but it deserves to be named rather than disguised as practical concern. Some of you are afraid of being wrong publicly. You have said things, you have taken positions, you have built an identity that would have to be revised, and there are people who would enjoy watching that revision. The fear of their satisfaction is holding you in a life you have outgrown. Consider how absurd that is when stated plainly. You are spending your one life protecting yourself from the smugness of people you do not even like. Name the specific fear, then the conversation becomes practical instead of paralytic. I want to say something about the loneliness of this, because that is the part almost nobody names. You cannot explain this to most people. If you tell a friend that you think your insomnia is spiritual, you will get one of two reactions: concern, which will make you feel unstable, or enthusiasm, which will be worse, because they will attach it to whatever framework they are currently excited about and hand it back to you unrecognizable. So you keep it quiet, and keeping it quiet makes it heavier. You start feeling like you are living two lives, the daytime one that everyone can see, and the nighttime one that nobody knows about. That split is exhausting in its own right, separate from the lack of sleep. Here is what I want you to know about that isolation. It is temporary and it is functional. Not everything can survive being spoken about too early. If you had shared this 6 months ago, someone would have talked you out of it, and you would have let them, because you wanted to be talked out of it. The silence protected the process, but the protection is ending. Soon you will meet people who recognize what you have been going through, without needing you to explain it, and something in your chest will unclench for the first time in a long while. There is a rule about seeds that applies here. A seed underground looks identical to a seed that is dead. There is no visible difference. If you dig it up to check on it, you kill it. The only way to know whether something is growing is to leave it buried and wait, and waiting is unbearable when you are not certain there is anything down there at all. You have wanted to dig it up. You have wanted proof. You have wanted one clear sign that would let you stop wondering. And the reason you have not been given one is that the proof would have required you to interrupt the growth. Every check would have cost you a season. So you got faith instead, not because faith is more spiritual than evidence, but because, in this particular case, faith was the only method that did not destroy the thing it was trying to verify. Type 222 if you have felt alone in this. Let me correct something in how you have been praying. You have been asking me to remove the discomfort. Almost every prayer you have offered in the last year has been some version of make this stop. Make the anxiety stop, make the waiting stop, make the sleeplessness stop. And I understand, pain wants to end. That is what pain is for. But you have never once asked what the discomfort is delivering. Not what it means, which is a philosophical question you can chew on for years without changing anything. What it is delivering. What is being handed to you that your hands were not open enough to receive before? Change that one question, and you change the entire relationship. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me, ask what is arriving. It sounds like a small difference. It is not. One question makes you a victim of a process. The other makes you a participant in it. Same circumstances, completely different life. I want to give you a few more questions worth asking at 3 in the morning, because the quality of your questions determines the quality of what you receive, and you have been asking low-quality questions for a long time without realizing it. Ask what you are pretending not to know. That is a devastating question, and it works immediately. Everyone knows something they are actively refusing to know. You have a piece of information about your situation that you have kept in a locked drawer because acting on it would be inconvenient. Open the drawer at 3 in the morning when nobody is watching and you have nothing to defend. Ask what you would do if the outcome were guaranteed. Not because outcomes are ever guaranteed, but because the question strips away the risk calculation and shows you what you actually want underneath it. Most people have no idea what they want. They only know what they think they can get. Those are completely different pieces of information, and confusing them costs people their entire lives. Ask who you would be if nobody who knew you now were watching. Not to escape accountability, but to identify how much of your personality is performance. You will be surprised. There is a version of you that only exists in front of certain people, and it may have grown so large that it has crowded out the original. Ask what you would regret not doing. Regret is a strangely reliable compass because it operates outside of ego. Ego cares about looking correct. Regret only cares about what was left undone. If you consult regret at 3 in the morning, it will tell you the truth faster than any amount of deliberation. Ask what you are being invited into rather than what you are being taken from. Every transition reads as loss from the front end and gain from the back end. You are currently standing at the front end, which is why everything looks like subtraction. There is something else happening that you have not noticed, and I want to point it out because it is evidence you can actually verify. Your intuition has sharpened. In the last several months, you have known things you had no way of knowing. You sensed a betrayal before it surfaced. You had a bad feeling about a person and dismissed it and were later proven right. You thought of someone and they called. You avoided a road for no reason and later learned there was an accident on it. You logged each of those as coincidence because that is what a rational person does. But there have been too many. The frequency has increased in direct proportion to the sleeplessness. Those two things are not unrelated. Something in you is being tuned, and tuning always makes an instrument sound strange before it sounds right. You are not losing your mind. You are gaining a sense, and a new sense is always overwhelming at first, the way a person who regains sight after years of blindness finds the world unbearably bright before they find it beautiful. There is a documented pattern with people who have their sight restored after long blindness. They do not experience joy at first, they experience distress. The visual world is chaotic and meaningless to them. They cannot tell distance. They bump into things they can see perfectly well. Some of them ask to have their eyes covered again because the input is unbearable, and a few of them never fully adapt and prefer the world they knew. You are in that adaptation period. The input is coming in faster than your interpretation can handle it. You are picking up on things about people and situations that you cannot yet make sense of, and the mismatch between perception and interpretation is producing anxiety that you have been attributing to the situations themselves. it will resolve. Not by the input decreasing, but by your interpretation catching up. Give it time and stop covering your eyes. Type 555 if your intuition has been unusually accurate lately. Now, practically, what do you actually do with this? Because I do not want you to walk away moved and unchanged. Emotion without action is just entertainment, and you have consumed enough of that. First, stop fighting the wake. When you find yourself conscious at 3, do not immediately reach for the phone to check the time and calculate how much sleep you have left. That calculation is the thing that turns wakefulness into panic. Do not measure it. Just let it be what it is. Second, keep something to write with beside the bed, not a phone, paper. The screen wakes a different part of your brain and interferes with the exact receptivity you are trying to protect. Write whatever comes. Do not edit. Do not judge whether it is profound. Most of it will look like nonsense in the morning. A small fraction of it will change your life. Third, ask one question and then be quiet, not a list of questions. One, and then wait longer than is comfortable. The answer rarely comes in the first minute. Most people quit at 90 seconds and conclude that nothing is there. Something is there. It is just slower than your attention span has been trained to tolerate. Fourth, protect your mornings. Whatever comes to you at 3 will be fragile at 7. If the first thing you do is check messages and absorb everyone else's urgency, you will lose it. Give yourself 10 minutes before the world gets your attention. Fifth, and this is the one people skip, actually do something with what you receive. Even something small. Send the message. Make the call. Cancel the thing. A single act of obedience does more for your sleep than a month of technique, because it tells the process that the message was received and it can stop repeating itself. Sixth, stop consuming other people's revelations while you are in the middle of receiving your own. This is the mistake I see most often in people who take this seriously. The moment they sense something is happening, they go looking for a teacher, a framework, a system, someone who has already mapped the territory, and the mapping overwrites the experience. You end up with someone else's language describing something that happened to you, and the borrowed language slowly replaces the memory of the actual event. Sit in your own experience for a while before you go looking for a name for it. Names are useful later. Early on, they are a form of theft. Seventh, watch your body. Not obsessively, just attentively. There are physical signals accompanying this process that you have been ignoring. Tension in a specific place that appears when you are near certain people. A change in your breathing when you approach a particular topic. A heaviness that arrives when you agree to something you did not want to agree to. Your body has been sending precise, reliable data for years, and you have been overriding it with reasoning. Start believing it, and you will make better decisions than you can currently justify. Eighth, reduce your inputs before you increase your discipline. Most people in your situation try to add a practice. More prayer, more meditation, more reading, more structure. Adding rarely works because your bandwidth is already full. Subtract first. Remove one source of noise. The clarity you gain from removal will exceed anything you gain from addition. That last point deserves more attention. Think about how a notification behaves on your phone. It repeats until acknowledged. It does not care that you are busy. It does not care that the timing is bad. It will keep surfacing until you engage with it. Your sleeplessness has been operating on exactly the same logic. It will not stop until you open the message, and you have been swiping it away for months, telling yourself you will get to it, wondering why it keeps coming back. Type Amen if you are ready to open it. I want to speak to those of you who have been carrying something heavy for a very long time. This is not your first difficult season. You have been through worse. There were years you barely survived, and you did survive, and almost nobody knows what it took. You carry that quietly, partly out of humility, and partly because you are not sure anyone would understand it. You have earned a certain kind of tiredness that goes deeper than sleep. It is not in your body, it is underneath your body. Rest does not touch it. Vacations do not touch it. You have wondered if it is permanent, if this is simply what the rest of your life is going to feel like, and that thought has visited you more than once at 3 in the morning. It is not permanent, but it will not be resolved by rest alone, because it was never a rest problem. It is a weight problem. You are carrying things that were never yours, responsibilities you inherited, guilt for outcomes you did not control, the emotional labor of people who never learned to carry themselves. You picked all of it up because you were capable, and capable people get handed more. Put it down. Not all at once, that would frighten you. But identify one thing this week that is not yours and consciously set it down. Watch what happens to your sleep. You may be surprised how much of your insomnia is simply the weight of things you agreed to carry without ever being asked. Let me help you identify what is not yours, because after enough years, the boundary gets blurry and everything feels like your responsibility. It is not yours if you did not cause it and cannot change it. That eliminates roughly half of what you are carrying. You have been holding the outcomes of other people's decisions as though your worry could adjust them. It cannot. Worry has never once altered an outcome. It only converts a future problem into a present injury. It is not yours if the person it belongs to has never asked you to carry it and would be embarrassed to know you were. You have been silently managing situations for people who are not aware you are managing them, and receiving no credit, and building resentment about the lack of credit for a job nobody assigned you. It is not yours if carrying it prevents the other person from developing the capacity to carry it themselves. This is the hardest one, because it looks like love and functions like harm. There are people in your life who have never had to grow because you kept absorbing the consequences. Your help became their ceiling. Setting it down will feel like abandonment and will actually be the first honest gift you have given them in years. It is not yours if it belongs to a version of you that no longer exists. Some of your obligations were made by a person you no longer are, in circumstances that no longer apply, to people who have changed as much as you have. Contracts expire. You are allowed to notice that. There is a version of your life waiting on the other side of this that you cannot currently picture, and that is not a failure of imagination, it is by design. If you could see it clearly, you would try to build it yourself with your current resources and your current understanding, and you would build a smaller version, a version scaled to what you can already handle. That is not what is being prepared for you. So you get fragments instead. Images that make no sense. A feeling about a city you have never visited. An inexplicable pull toward a field you have no training in. A name that keeps appearing. These fragments are frustrating because they cannot be assembled yet. But they are being deposited, one by one, in the hours you keep resenting. You will assemble them later. And when you do, you will look back at this exhausting season and recognize it as the most productive year of your life, even though it produced nothing you could show anyone at the time. Type 1212 if you have been receiving fragments you cannot yet explain. I want to be careful here, because there is a kind of teaching that romanticizes suffering, and I refuse to give you that. Not all pain is meaningful. Some pain is just pain. Some sleeplessness is a medical issue and needs a doctor, not a video. If you have been struggling for a long time and something in you knows this is beyond spiritual reframing, please go get help. Getting help is not a lack of faith. It is stewardship of the body you were given. But I also know that many of you have already done that. You have seen the doctor. The tests came back normal. You were told to reduce stress, as though stress were a dial you could simply turn down. And you left that appointment feeling more alone, because the only explanation on offer did not match your experience. For you, this is the missing piece, not a replacement for care, an addition to it, a framework that finally makes the last year make sense. I also want to push back on something you may have absorbed from spiritual content, including content that sounds like this one. There are teachers who will tell you that every difficulty is a blessing in disguise, that everything happens for a reason, that if you just shift your perspective, the pain will convert into gratitude. That teaching does enormous damage to people in genuine crisis, because it makes them responsible for their own suffering. If everything is a lesson, then failing to feel better becomes a failure of understanding. Some things are just wrong. Some losses are just losses. A child who dies is not a lesson. A betrayal is not a gift. Cruelty is not curriculum. You are allowed to hold something as both meaningless and survivable. You are allowed to say, "This should not have happened, and I will still build something afterward." Those two statements do not contradict each other, and forcing yourself to find the silver lining in genuine evil will corrode you faster than the evil did. What I am describing tonight is different. I am not asking you to be grateful for your sleeplessness. I am telling you that it is not random, and it is not punishment, and it is doing something. That is a much smaller claim, and it is one you can actually verify by paying attention. Let me talk about what happens when this ends. Because it does end. This is not your permanent condition, and I want you to hold that. One night, without warning, you will sleep deeply, and you will wake up confused, checking the clock twice, wondering whether you missed something. Nothing dramatic will have happened the day before. There will be no obvious explanation. It will simply be finished. But you will notice things in the weeks after. Decisions will come faster. You will know what you want with an immediacy that used to take you months of deliberation. Situations that used to trigger you will pass without landing. You will find yourself saying no easily without the elaborate justification you used to construct. People will comment that you seem different and struggle to say how. What they are noticing is that you are no longer negotiating with yourself. The internal argument that consumed most of your bandwidth for years has been settled. That is what all of this was for. Not information, resolution. I want to describe that settlement more precisely because it is the actual prize and you should know what you are working toward. Right now, a large percentage of your mental energy goes to an ongoing internal debate. Should I stay or go? Am I being unreasonable or are they? Is this the right career or am I wasting my life? Was that decision a mistake? Should I have said something? The debate never resolves because both sides have good arguments and no new information arrives to break the tie. That debate is running constantly, in the background, consuming resources whether or not you are consciously engaged with it. It is why you feel tired after a day of doing nothing. It is why you cannot concentrate on a book. It is why conversations exhaust you. Most of your processing power is allocated to an unwinnable internal argument, and you have been trying to function on whatever is left over. When the settlement comes, that allocation is released. And the amount of energy that returns is genuinely shocking. People describe it as feeling 10 years younger. What they are actually feeling is the return of the bandwidth they had been spending on an argument that has finally concluded. You will not become a different person. You will become the same person with access to your full capacity for the first time since you were a child. Type 333 if you are ready for that settlement. There is a specific type of person watching this, and I want to speak to you directly. You are the one who has been faithful in obscurity. You have done the right thing repeatedly with no witness and no reward. You have kept promises to people who did not keep theirs to you. You have chosen integrity in moments where the dishonest option was easier and would never have been discovered. And you have wondered whether any of it registered, whether there is any accounting at all, or whether the universe is simply indifferent and the decent people are just the ones who did not take what they could have taken. It registered every instance. Not one of them was missed. And here is what you must understand about the season you are in. You are not being tested anymore. You passed. The testing ended some time ago and you did not notice, because you were so accustomed to being tested that you kept bracing for the next one. What you are in now is not a test, it is a transfer. Something is being moved into your possession, and the reason it is uncomfortable is that transfers of this size require preparation. You are being prepared, not proven. There is nothing left to prove. Let that settle. You are not on trial. The verdict came in, and it was in your favor. I know that is hard to receive, because you have organized your entire self around effort. Being told you have already passed is disorienting for someone who has never known any identity except the one who tries harder. You will feel, for a while, like you are cheating, like you should be doing more, like resting is a form of theft. That feeling is withdrawal, not conscience. You are coming off a very long dependency on struggle as a source of self-worth. The symptoms are real and they will pass, but do not mistake them for guidance. Do not let the discomfort of rest push you back into unnecessary labor just so you can feel like yourself again. You will need to build a new source of identity, one that does not require exhaustion to certify it. That is genuinely difficult work, and it is the real assignment of this next season, not achievement, identity. Learning to be someone when you are not producing anything. I want to give you something to hold on to for the nights ahead, because there will be more of them before this concludes. When you wake at 3 and the old panic starts to rise, say this: something is arriving, and I am awake to receive it. Say it even if you do not fully believe it. Belief follows behavior more often than it precedes it. And then breathe. Not a technique. Just breathe. And let yourself be conscious in the dark without treating it as an emergency. The emergency framing is what makes it unbearable. Remove the framing, and what remains is simply a quiet room and a person who is awake in it. That is tolerable. That is even, on some nights, pleasant. You have made an enemy of your own nights. Make peace with them instead. They have been trying to help you this entire time, in the only language they had available. Type 777 if you are making peace with your nights. I want to tell you about another person, because stories carry things that explanation cannot. There was a woman who had lost a great deal. Not in one event, which would have been easier to name, but in a long sequence of smaller losses that accumulated until she could not remember what a normal life had felt like. A parent, then a marriage, then a job, then a friendship that had been the last stable thing in her life. 4 years, 4 subtractions. By the end, she had almost nothing left that predated the losses. She stopped sleeping in the 3rd year. Not dramatically, she simply started waking at 2 and staying awake until 5, every night without exception. She assumed it was grief and waited for it to pass. It did not pass. It continued for 19 months. What she did with those hours was unremarkable. She made tea, she sat by a window, she did not pray, because she had stopped believing anything was listening. Sometimes she cried and sometimes she did not. Mostly she just sat, because there was nothing else to do, and she was too tired to be productive and too awake to sleep. And in the 20th month, sitting by that window at 3 in the morning, something in her chest opened. She could not describe it better than that. There was no voice, no vision, no revelation she could write down. Just an opening, and on the other side of the opening, an absolutely unshakable certainty that she was not alone and never had been. She said afterward that it was the most important experience of her life, and she has never been able to explain it to anyone. She also said that if she had been sleeping normally, it would not have happened. There would have been no window in her schedule and no window in her defenses. The losses cleared her life. The sleeplessness cleared her hours. And what arrived required both. I am not telling you that your losses were arranged for this purpose. I have already told you I will not make that claim. What I am telling you is that a life that has been emptied has a particular capacity that a full life does not. And you are currently in possession of that capacity whether or not you asked for it. You are more available right now than you have ever been. That is not a consolation prize. It is a genuine condition with genuine consequences, and it will not last forever. Life will fill back up. It always does. The window you are in is real, and it is temporary. Use it. There is something I want you to consider that may reframe everything I have said. You have been treating this season as an interruption of your life, a period to get through so you can return to normal. But what if this is not an interruption? What if the last year was your life, more fully than the years that preceded it, and the thing you are trying to return to was actually the interruption? A long detour through a version of yourself that was never quite right, that you maintained out of habit and obligation and fear of what changing would cost. Sit with that, because if it is true, then the sleeplessness is not keeping you from your life, it is returning you to it. And every hour you have spent awake was an hour of coming home, not an hour of being lost. The exhaustion was the price of the journey, not evidence that you took a wrong turn. Type Amen if something in you recognized that. Let me address the people who have tried this before and got nothing, because some of you have already done everything I just described. You sat in the dark, you asked, you waited longer than was comfortable, you kept the notebook, and nothing came. No opening, no clarity, just more dark and more tired, and a growing suspicion that this whole framework is a story people tell themselves to make suffering bearable. I am not going to talk you out of that suspicion. Suspicion is healthy, and the people who never doubt anything are not deep, they are just uncurious. But I will tell you two things about silence. The first is that silence is not always absence. There are periods in every genuine spiritual life where the sense of presence withdraws entirely, and this has been documented so consistently across so many centuries and traditions that it functions almost as a stage of development rather than an anomaly. It is not punishment, and it is not evidence of failure. It appears most often in people who were previously receiving a great deal, and it appears at the point where continued reception would have made them dependent on the experience rather than on the source. You are being weaned. That is a harsh word, but it is accurate. A child who is never weaned never learns to feed itself. There is a level of maturity that cannot be reached while the comforting signal is always available, and so at a certain point the signal is reduced, not to abandon you, but to develop something in you that only develops in its absence. The second thing is that you may be receiving and failing to recognize it because you are looking for the wrong format. You want the dramatic version, the voice, the vision, the unmistakable moment. And what you are actually getting is a slow drift in your preferences, a quiet loss of appetite for things that used to appeal to you, a new patience with a person you used to find intolerable, a conviction that has strengthened so gradually you cannot remember when it arrived. That is the most common delivery method by a wide margin. Almost nobody gets the burning bush. Almost everybody gets a slow change of taste. And because it is slow, they attribute it to age or mood or circumstance and never once consider that it might be the answer to what they were asking. Look at what has changed in you over the last year. Not what has happened to you, what has changed in you, your tolerances, your interests, what makes you angry, what makes you cry. Those shifts are the delivery, and you have been standing at the mailbox waiting for a package while the mail was being slipped under the door. Type 555 if you have been looking for the wrong format. I know how much you want a timeline. You want to know how long this lasts, how many more nights, when exactly you can expect relief. I am not going to give you a number, and not because I am withholding, because a number would ruin it. You would start counting down instead of paying attention, and the entire value of this season is in the paying attention. What I will tell you is that it is further along than you think. You are not at the beginning. The beginning was months ago, and you have already done the hardest part, which was continuing while confused. Most people stop when they cannot see the shape of things. You did not stop. That is the whole qualification. The rest is downhill from here, though downhill has its own difficulties. Descending is harder on the knees than climbing. You will need to be gentle with yourself in a way you have never practiced. That will be its own lesson. Type Amen if you have continued while confused. Let me speak to the relationships, because that is where this will show up first and most painfully. When you change internally, your relationships have to renegotiate. Not because anyone is being difficult, but because every relationship is an unspoken agreement about who each person will be, and you have unilaterally revised your half of the agreement. That is genuinely disruptive, even when nobody is at fault. Some people will renegotiate happily. They have been waiting for you to become more yourself, and they will be relieved. Those relationships will get stronger and will surprise you with their depth. Some people will renegotiate reluctantly, and it will be awkward for a season, and then it will settle. Be patient with those. Do not force the pace. People need time to adjust to a version of you they did not agree to. And some will not renegotiate at all. They will resist, escalate, and eventually withdraw. Those are the ones that will hurt, and I want to prepare you for a specific kind of hurt that catches people off guard. The pain is not primarily about losing the person, it is about learning what the relationship was actually built on. When someone can only tolerate you in your diminished form, you find out that they were not attached to you, they were attached to a function you performed. And that discovery retroactively reframes years of history, which is why it hurts far out of proportion to the actual loss. You will spend some nights on that. It belongs in the 3 in the morning hours as much as anything else. Let it come, let it hurt, and do not draw the conclusion that everyone was fake and nothing was real. That is the bitter conclusion, and it is available to you, and it will cost you the rest of your life if you take it. The truer conclusion is smaller and harder. Some people loved you and some people used you, and most people did both, in varying proportions, because human beings are mixed. Learning to hold that without becoming cynical is one of the actual achievements of adulthood, and very few people manage it. Type 222 if you have lost a relationship while changing. Now I want to talk about what to do with the day after. Because the nights get all the attention, and the days are where the real difficulty lives. You will wake up tired. You will have to function, and there is a particular kind of shame that comes with underperforming in a life you used to handle easily, and it compounds the exhaustion in a way that is worse than the exhaustion itself. Lower your standards deliberately rather than accidentally. That is the single most useful practical thing I can tell you. If you do not lower them on purpose, you will fail to meet them and interpret that as personal failure. If you lower them consciously, the same output becomes a met expectation rather than a missed one, and the psychological difference is enormous even though the actual performance is identical. Decide in advance what a minimum acceptable day looks like in this season. Write it down, make it genuinely minimal, and then when you hit it, count it as a success rather than a compromise. Second, eliminate optional decisions. Decision-making draws on the same reserve as sleep does, and yours is depleted. Wear the same thing, eat the same thing, take the same route. This is not stagnation, it is triage. You are conserving the fuel you need for the one decision that actually matters. Third, protect one relationship. You will not have the capacity to maintain everything. Choose one person and stay in genuine contact with them, even when you do not want to. Isolation compounds faster than any other factor in this process, and a single point of real connection prevents most of the damage. Fourth, move your body even when you cannot exercise. Walk, that is all. Not for fitness, not for a step count, not to earn anything. Walking does something to unprocessed emotion that sitting does not, and it has done so for as long as human beings have existed. Every tradition that produced anything worth reading involved people walking long distances with nothing to do but think. You do not need to understand the mechanism, you only need to go outside. Fifth, eat like you respect yourself. I know that sounds trivial next to everything else I have said, but a body running on almost no sleep and almost no nutrition will produce despair that has nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with chemistry. You will interpret that despair as spiritual, and it will not be. Do not let a solvable physical problem masquerade as an unsolvable spiritual one. Sixth, and this is the one nobody tells you, expect the emotional volatility. You will cry at things that do not warrant it. You will be irrationally angry at a stranger in a parking lot. You will feel a surge of H